Today, we will talk about key political developments in Bangladesh during August 2024 were marked by significant upheaval and uncertainty. Resignation of Sheikh Hasina. On August 5, 2024, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned after facing intense public protests. Formation of interim government. After Hasina's resignation, an interim government was formed, headed by Nobel laureate Yunus. Release of political figures. Following Hasina's departure, opposition leader and former Prime Minister Khaleda, who had been imprisoned on corruption charges, was released. Political vacuum and uncertainty. The abrupt change in leadership created a political vacuum. International implications. The resignation and political crisis impacted Bangladesh's foreign relations. Now details: Sheikh Hasina's resignation and its political impact in Bangladesh. On August 5, 2024, Sheikh Hasina stepped down as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, ending her long-standing leadership and marking a crucial political shift in the country. Her resignation followed a series of intense protests and significant unrest. Here's a breakdown of the key events and their implications. Background of the protests. Initial triggers. The protests began in July 2024, primarily driven by university students opposing a policy that reserved 30% of government jobs for descendants of those who fought in the 1971 Independence War. This controversial job quota system, reinstated by a court decision, angered many graduates who found it difficult to compete for public sector positions. Protests intensifying. What started as protests against job quotas soon expanded into broader anti-government demonstrations. Allegations of corruption and authoritarianism under Hasina's government added fuel to the fire. The unrest escalated, leading to clashes between protesters and security forces. The violence resulted in nearly 300 deaths and thousands of injuries over several weeks. Hasina's resignation and aftermath. Announcement of resignation. On August 5, 2024, Army Chief General Wakar-uz-Zaman announced Hasina's resignation. The situation in Dhaka had deteriorated, with protesters storming her residence. Reports suggest that Hasina fled the country by military helicopter to India as chaos spread across the capital. Interim government. Following her resignation, a caretaker government was formed, headed by Nobel laureate Yunus. The military assumed a key role in maintaining peace, urging the public to remain calm during the transition period. Political and social implications. Governance impact. Hasina's departure marked a turning point in Bangladesh's political sphere. Her leadership had come under increasing criticism for authoritarian practices, including the suppression of dissent and human rights abuses. With the military now playing a more visible role, concerns have emerged about potential abuses reminiscent of previous military regimes. International relations. Sheikh Hasina had maintained strong ties with India, and her resignation complicates regional dynamics. While India had been a key ally, her departure could lead to shifts in diplomatic relations. Speculation suggests she may seek asylum in a Western nation, but she is expected to remain in India for the foreseeable future. Public sentiment. The widespread protests reflected significant public dissatisfaction with the government. Hasina's resignation was celebrated by many as a victory for democracy, with some analysts framing the moment as a second independence for Bangladesh. Hasina's legacy and future challenges. Her leadership. Sheikh Hasina led Bangladesh for over 2 decades across the terms 1996 to 2001, 2009 to 2024. Her administration achieved notable infrastructure development, but was also heavily criticized for stifling political freedoms and engaging in human rights violations. Challenges ahead. The newly formed interim government faces the immediate task of restoring stability and addressing the grievances of the population. With various political factions vying for influence, the future remains uncertain and the possibility of further unrest looms. Formation of interim government in Bangladesh. In the wake of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's resignation on August 5, 2024, Bangladesh witnessed the formation of an interim government. This was a response to widespread protests and unrest that demanded significant political change. Background of resignation. Protests. Beginning in July 2024, mass demonstrations erupted over a contentious job quota system, eventually expanding into nationwide anti-government protests. These protests were fueled by accusations of corruption and authoritarianism, leading to severe clashes that caused over 300 deaths. Hasina's departure. Sheikh Hasina fled to India under increasing pressure, leaving a leadership vacuum. This departure necessitated the establishment of an interim administration, appointment of Muhammad Yunus. New leadership. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus was appointed as the chief advisor to the interim government on August 8, 2024. His selection was seen as a step toward restoring democratic governance, with significant influence coming from student leaders who had been central to the protests. Public reaction. The appointment of Yunus was widely welcomed, with many viewing it as a moment of transformation and calling it a second independence for the country, expressing hope for substantial political change. Interim government structure and challenges. Parliament dissolution. In response to public demands, the parliament was dissolved before Yunus officially took office. This move was seen as a way to pave the path for a fresh governance. Cabinet formation. Discussions regarding the composition of the interim cabinet were underway, with an emphasis on including representatives from the protesting student groups. Military's role. The military played a pivotal role in the transition of power, which raised concerns about how much influence the military might have over the civilian government moving forward. Immediate challenges for the interim government. Restoring order. Addressing ongoing violence and instability remains an urgent priority for the interim administration. Election preparations. Organizing new elections within 90 days will be crucial in re-establishing a legitimate government. Addressing public grievances. Tackling corruption. Ensuring accountability for past governmental abuses and rebuilding public trust will be key to the interim government's success. Conclusion. The formation of the interim government, led by Muhammad Yunus, represents a crucial turning point for Bangladesh. After years of authoritarian rule, the new administration faces the dual challenge of restoring peace and steering the country toward a democratic transition through fair and transparent elections. Release of political figures in Bangladesh. The release of key political figures in Bangladesh, most notably former Prime Minister Khaleda, occurred during a period of significant political upheaval following the resignation of Sheikh Hasina on August 5, 2024. Below are the major details surrounding this event. Background of Khaleda. Khaleda, a central figure in Bangladesh's political landscape, served as Prime Minister from 1991 to 1996, and from 2001 to 2006, she leads the Bangladesh Nationalist Party (BNP), the country's main opposition party. Zia had been incarcerated on corruption charges tied to the Zia Orphanage Trust, where she was found guilty of misappropriating funds meant for charitable causes. Initially sentenced to 5 years in prison in 2018, her sentence was extended to 17 years due to additional graft charges, circumstances leading to her release. Presidential Executive Order. Khaleda was freed on August 5, 2024, through an executive decision made by President Mohammed Sheikh Hasina. This development occurred just hours after Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled to India amidst growing protests and civil unrest. High-level discussions. Zia's release was decided during a meeting that included military leaders and opposition figures, where it was collectively agreed to free her, along with others detained in recent protests. This step was taken to address rising public discontent and to stabilize the political situation. Health concerns. At the time of her release, Zia was reportedly dealing with several health issues and was receiving hospital treatment. Her supporters have long claimed that her imprisonment was politically motivated, aimed at sidelining her from political life. Political implications. Impact on the BNP. Khaleda Zia's release is expected to revitalize the BNP as it seeks to re-establish its influence following the resignation of Hasina. Zia's return to the political stage could reshape the opposition's role in Bangladesh, particularly in light of the intensified protests that occurred before Hasina stepped down. Public response. After her release, Zia called for unity among her followers, stressing the need to build a democratic Bangladesh that respects all communities. She acknowledged the sacrifices made by those who stood against Hasina's administration and encouraged citizens to work toward a progressive future for the nation. Broader release of detainees. The presidential order also called for the release of over 2,000 people who had been arrested during the anti-government protests. This was seen as a move to reduce tensions and promote a more inclusive political atmosphere. Khaleda Zia's release, along with that of other political detainees, marks a turning point in Bangladesh's political crisis. As the BNP gears up to take a more active role in opposition politics, the country's political future will largely depend on how the interim government and opposition forces navigate this transitional period. Zia's release underscores the evolving dynamics in Bangladesh's politics as the country shifts away from the long dominance of Hasina's administration. Political vacuum and uncertainty in Bangladesh. The resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on August 5, 2024, has left Bangladesh in a state of political uncertainty and upheaval. Below are the key elements surrounding this development. Background of the political vacuum. Sheikh Hasina's resignation. Hasina stepped down following weeks of intense protests that began in July 2024. What started as opposition to a controversial job quota system for government positions quickly transformed into broader calls for her resignation. Allegations of corruption, authoritarian governance, and human rights violations during her time in office fueled the unrest. Protests and escalation. The protests saw violent confrontations between demonstrators and security forces, resulting in over 300 deaths and thousands more injured. With the situation becoming increasingly dire, Hasina fled to India, leaving a leadership void that necessitated the formation of an interim government. Formation of the interim government. New leadership. Nobel laureate Yunus was appointed to head the interim government soon after Hasina's exit. His selection was seen as a response to public calls for reform and was intended to help stabilize the nation's growing crisis. Role of the military. The military played a critical role in the transition, with General Zaman announcing Hasina's resignation and backing Yunus's leadership. This involvement has raised concerns about whether military influence will continue to shape governance in the future. Challenges and uncertainties. Restoring stability. The foremost task of the interim government is to restore peace in a country rocked by violence. Public sentiment remains tense, and if grievances aren't addressed, the unrest could continue. Election planning. Although there are pledges for new elections, the timing and conditions remain uncertain. The interim government must balance public expectations with the need to ensure free and fair elections. Economic strain. The political crisis has compounded the economic challenges Bangladesh was already facing, including high inflation and dwindling foreign reserves. Ongoing instability threatens foreign investment and key industries, such as the garment sector. Potential for social unrest. There is a risk of continued unrest, especially if Islamist groups or supporters of the ousted Awami League seek to challenge the new government. Retaliatory violence remains a possibility, further complicating the political situation. Possible future scenarios. Political experts have proposed several potential outcomes for Bangladesh's immediate future. Most likely outcome: a military-backed technocratic government may work to restore order and gradually move towards elections. This reflects past instances where military influence shaped the governance structure. International implications of Sheikh Hasina's ouster and the interim government in Bangladesh. The removal of Sheikh Hasina from power and the subsequent establishment of an interim government in Bangladesh have far-reaching international consequences. These effects span diplomatic relations, regional security, and economic partnerships. Below are the key areas of impact. Effects on foreign relations. United States. Hasina's resignation could lead to improved ties with the US, which had previously criticized her administration over issues related to human rights and democratic governance. The new interim leadership under Mohammed Yunus, who has strong support across the political spectrum in the US, is seen as potentially more aligned with American interests. This shift could pave the way for enhanced cooperation, particularly in areas such as poverty reduction, education, and defense relations, with a focus on promoting democratic values and transparency. India. Hasina's departure may put a strain on the historically close relationship between Bangladesh and India. Under Hasina, Bangladesh and India shared strong diplomatic ties, rooted in their shared history during the independence struggle. However, the opposition party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party (BNP), has been critical of the Awami League's perceived subservience to Indian interests. Should the BNP regain political power, it could lead to heightened tensions between the two nations, as India may perceive this shift as a potential security risk given past frictions during BNP rule. China. Under Hasina's leadership, Bangladesh maintained a delicate balance between its relationships with the US and China, particularly benefiting from substantial Chinese investments in infrastructure through the Belt and Road Initiative. With the change in leadership, there is uncertainty about the future of this relationship. While the interim government led by Yunus might seek to distance itself from China to foster stronger ties with the West, Chinese investments remain vital for Bangladesh's economic development, and a complete disengagement may not be feasible. Regional stability. Geopolitical importance. Bangladesh's strategic position along the Bay of Bengal makes it a critical player in regional geopolitics, especially between India and China. The current political uncertainty could lead to instability in the region, prompting India to tighten its border security due to concerns over potential extremist activities emanating from Bangladesh. Rohingya refugee crisis. Bangladesh remains home to nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees, a humanitarian crisis stemming from violence in Myanmar. The interim government must manage this complex issue while maintaining balanced relations with both India and China, who play pivotal roles in addressing regional security and refugee resettlement. Security concerns. Rise of Islamist groups. With Hasina no longer in power, there are concerns that Islamist groups, previously suppressed under her government, could regain influence. The political shift may embolden these groups, potentially leading to increased violence against minority communities and the resurgence of radical Islamist movements within the country. Military's role. The involvement of the military in the formation of the interim government has raised questions about the long-term stability of governance in Bangladesh. Historically, military intervention has led to authoritarian rule, and if the military assumes a more dominant role, it could affect Bangladesh's international reputation, particularly in terms of human rights and democratic governance. Economic impact. Foreign investment. The ongoing political instability deter foreign investors at a time when Bangladesh's economy requires support to sustain its growth. Trade relations. Strengthening Bangladesh's trade relations with both Western countries and regional partners will be vital for its economic future. The interim leadership will need to carefully navigate these relationships to maintain existing trade ties and foster new economic partnerships, ensuring continued access to foreign markets and investment opportunities. The removal of Sheikh Hasina has set off a chain reaction of international implications for Bangladesh, affecting its foreign relations, regional security, and economic stability. The interim government's foreign policy approach will play a critical role in shaping the nation's relationships with key global powers such as the US, India, and China. Successfully managing these dynamics will be essential for safeguarding Bangladesh's sovereignty, fostering regional stability, and promoting sustainable development amid a politically uncertain landscape. Thank you for watching. If you come across any unfamiliar vocabulary during this segment, don't worry. Just check the description below, where you'll find a link to our website. We've provided a comprehensive English to Bangla vocabulary guide, specifically for this news story to help you better understand the content. Don't forget to follow us on social media channels for more updates and breaking news. Stay safe, stay informed. This is Rob, and you've been watching Learning Site. Have a great night.